Hello everyone. I want to make a video today. I'm going to be in Hebrews 4, 1 through 3, and then I'm going to skip over and read Hebrews 4, 14 through 16. And so then I might read a little bit more. I don't know for sure. I'm in the King James Version, Hebrews 4, 1 through 3. Let us therefore fear, lest the promise being left of us of entering into his rest, any of you should seem to come short of it. For unto us was the gospel preached, as well as unto them. But the word preached did not profit them, not being mixed with faith in them that heard it. For as we have believed to enter into rest, as he said, as I have sworn in my rest, as I have sworn in my wrath, that they enter into my rest, although the works were finished from the foundation of the world. And then 14 through 16 says, seeing then that we have a great high priest that is passed into heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold fast the profession of our faith. For we have not a high priest which cannot be touched with the feelings of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. So, he says don't fear. Well, let me comment on this first. He said, let us come boldly unto the throne of grace. I've talked about bold prayers in other videos. I want to just touch on that. Elijah told Elisha that if he saw him go up, that he would get to ask what he would. He asked for a double portion of his spirit. Elijah did not chastise him for that or rebuke him. He didn't say, boy, you'll never be half the man I am. And when he asked Elijah, told him that he'd get that double portion, Elijah shot for the moon. I think we ought to shoot for the moon. If we miss, we might hit a star. If we shoot low, we'll hit low every time. He didn't say, well, I've been working for you 10 years. I'd appreciate a raise, or if I just had a vacation or whatever. He asked for a double portion. When Jesus healed blind men, he'd say, what would you have me to do? And they would say, that I might receive my sight. They didn't say, well, if I could just read Braille, Jesus, or if I could just have a seeing eye dog. And I think that, like with us, we ought to have bold prayers. We shouldn't say, Lord, just help me to have enough to get by. Or say, Lord, give me enough that I can get by and help someone else too. 2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. The Old Testament children of Israel struggling in the wilderness, and the New Testament people are struggling to enter in to his rest. The New Testament is is not a house without a foundation. The Old Testament rests upon the New Testament. The New Testament rests upon the Old Testament, however how you want to think about it. The Old Testament is a shadow of things to come in the New Testament. The more you understand the Old Testament, the more you see how it relates to the New. It's parallel with the Old Testament children trying to enter their rest from the wilderness, and us modern day Christians trying to enter into our rest and eternal rest. Children of Israel heard about a promised land that they did not receive, nor did they enter. And that is the warning. That's that let us fear, that he's warning us to do the same, and that we will not enter into the promises that he has for us in today's times. While this text is powerful, it is kind of fearful, and God will disturb your comfort zone. There's nothing in your faith that disturbs you, humbles you, or causes you to drop down on knees in prayer. Then you probably need to go further. Real faith is a conflict and a struggle and a wrestling between where I am and where I ought to be. Like Jesus praying in the garden, he had to pray 3 times to bring his will in alignment with his Father's will. And if he had to pray 3 times, there's no time telling how many times I have to pray. It's like Jacob wrestling with the angel. and wouldn't let him go. I've told the story about the two wolves, but just to refresh your mind, there was a Indian father that told his son, said, "Son, there's two wolves that live within you, and they're fighting to see who's going to win. There's a good wolf and a bad wolf." And the son said, "Who's going to win, Father?" And he said, the one that you feed." There's always a struggle to become what we hear in the Word of God. There's always a struggle and a gulf between what you hear, what you are. A struggle between the human you and the holy you. It's like twins struggling in the womb. You can't get rid of one without killing the other. You pray, let the Holy One kill the human, but it's not going to happen. The enemy is hoping that the human one will kill the Holy One, but grace says it's not going to happen. Let the holy Dale kill the human Dale. We're wrestling to enter into our rest. There's not a person listening to this that's not in some kind of wilderness right now. A wilderness that defies all comforts. No matter how you try, the wilderness will disturb your rest. You can have custom designed clothes, a big fancy house, a fancy car, but it will still leave you not fitting in. The writer of Hebrews warns us, if we don't learn from the ones we went on before us, that we will die in the same spot. So the text says, let us fear. You cannot be successful and be afraid of your naysayers. They will always run you away from what God has called you to. In fact, it's the barking of the naysayers that assure me of the promise of the holy. If you hadn't barked so loud, I would have not known that anything was in there. But it was the barking of the naysayers that led me to where the treasure was. Let us fear lest we live and die and not reach the potential in what he's promised us. Now that I'm scared of. I'm not afraid of death as long as I live first. In the cemetery, there's apologies never made, songs never sung, sermons never preached, love never expressed. And I hate to die. I heard a man say that around the bed was ghosts of the talents that had tried to work with you. And they say, we came to you and tried to work with you, but you wouldn't do it. And now we're going to die, and you're going to die, and we got to die with you. I want to live full and die empty. What I'm mortally afraid of is that I could exist without really living. That I'd let my fear of others and circumstances back me up from the promise of what I need to be. I am convinced that way too many people live and die in the wilderness of uncertainty. They are not sure and die being unsure. But you're afraid of the wrong thing. You ought to be afraid of not accomplishing what you were created to be. Fear is your enemy. You're afraid of the wrong thing. You ought to be more afraid of not accomplishing what you were created to do. It's hard to do what preachers do. The pressures, the scrutiny, the demands. Trust me, if you run up behind a pulpit, you might limp back if you get back at all. There is a reason to fear. The only reason to fear is the greater fear to live and die and not find out who you are. To die wondering if you put all of it in and stretched to your full potential. Who knows if I'd pushed a little deeper, if I could have broke through. I heard a woman, she wrote, I think it was a poem, and her name was Irma Bombeck. She said, if I had my life to live over, how many of you know that if you had your life to live over again, you could do better than you did this time? Well, I got news. You don't get to live it over. You better do it right the first time. I hate to die with questions, unanswered questions, that we would fail to enter in the promises and settle for mediocrity. So many people settle for less than what was the best in their life and talk themselves out of the promises because you're more afraid of the opposition than you were the one that called you. I'm talking about turning down your fear of failure, turning up your fear of what you could have been, and what you could have done and what you could have had. You left something that you never touched because you let some voice talking in your ear persuade you to settle for less. We need to fear about that. Let us fear that we fall short and settle for less. The word did not profit some of them. Profit is what you have after the transaction is over. You line your assets up and you deduct your liabilities, and whatever left over is profit. We have been knocked down so low that we didn't think we could ever get up again. I've been through a lot myself, but I'm still here. Before you clap, though, you need to know that there has been some big deductions in my life. It's harder for me at 71 than it was at 24 when I first began to be over a church. Nobody likes going through anything, but God seemed to say you would have blown it if you hadn't been proven. Your armor was just too shiny and didn't have any dents in it. You needed that so you could preach rejected, sad, hurting. I had to take you through the fire. I almost died, made some mistakes, but I still got something left. I've been operated on, had radiation treatments, 124 of them. But I spent something to survive it. No matter how clearly God says, if you don't mix it with faith, it will not profit you. Years ago, I had somebody leave our church, and I heard that they said they were going somewhere where they could get the word. You have to learn not to let that discourage you. If you have 7 kids and you feed them all the same thing, 5 of them is just growing like a weed, and the others say they're not getting anything, I know it's not the food. The kitchen's good, the food is good, so you better check something else. So when God sends out his word, if you don't send out your faith, catch it, then it won't profit you. It just fall for nothing. It reminds me of these drinks, health drinks, and you shake them. It says shake well. Everything's in there that you need, but if you don't shake it, you'll just be drinking off the top. There's nothing wrong with the contents. There's nothing wrong with the vessel. But if you don't shake it up, you won't get everything that they intended for you to get. You can take the ingredients of a cake, but if you don't mix it up, if you don't put it in the fire and let it come out something different than it went in, it's not going to be good. You mix the ingredients to turn it into something that it wasn't at the beginning. In order to mix something, you have to work with it a little bit. Like the individual ingredients of cornbread. I don't like the ingredients individually, the flour, meal, or whatever, the raw eggs, but you mix it up and put it in the oven, and boy, you got something really good. I want to speak to the people that hear the word of God that don't change. You come to church and there's nothing wrong with your word or your preacher. I say it because I've seen too many of God's kids getting stronger, processing the word. If you could just uncross your arms and get to work. And talking about that, those ingredients for cornbread, Melinda don't have to say, Dale, get out of them raw eggs. I was saving them. You have to send your faith out to meet the word. The enemy doesn't care how much you believe as long as you sit down. But the moment you start acting, they get nervous. You can't believe it if you go to work and you just can't shout about it. You got to work at it. Or to be able to see what you believe in by what you're doing right now. Somebody that's close to you and near you is in the fight of their life. If not this, then it's that or the other. God is not going to use anything that you lost, but he's going to use what you got left. It's not much, it's not too much if the storm's on the outside. That's what's wearing you out. But it's rather the storm on the inside. The ship doesn't sink because it's in the water. It sinks because the water gets in it. God sent this message to locate you, find out where you're at, and tell you and locate you and need to know where you're at. He needs to know where you're at and for you to get to where you need to be. If you stand the mix, there is a blessing coming after the stirring and the shaking and the fire. Everything may be shaken, but God's still got a hold of you. I really enjoyed getting this to you today. I really hope that this has helped someone and I hope it gets you what you need. Until next time, may God bless you.